Hey, Seventh ELA, Mr. Briglio here. Going again to look at historical account and historical fiction through the lens of our compare and contrast unit. So I wanted to start off with just a little thought about historical events. What you see here are three ships, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, all of which are real in history, all of which were captained or at least focused through a gentleman by the name of Christopher Columbus. You see in these two paintings here. But the question is, what's real and what's fiction? What's an account versus what is the historic change if we were to be looking at these stories? Well, first of all, we know that the ships were real. We know that the man himself was real. We know that the locations were real. But what we don't, or what probably isn't real, is the depictions that you see in these paintings. So as a compare contrast, if it's historical account versus historical fiction, oftentimes the world will take what was very real in our historical past. They'll take the characters, they'll take the events, they'll take the locations, they'll take the conflicts, and they will add fictional people, fictional emotion, fictional point of view, and they'll embellish or change the story. So briefly, historical fiction. It uses historical events as an inspiration, right? The idea behind some moment in the past becomes the reason this new fictional author is writing a fictional story. But it's based on something very real. Once again, historical fiction is false, but it is based on something real. It has a lot of real elements to it. Secondly, it uses character setting events that are not real, or it extends the truth, but it adds real people setting in events. So again, when you look at this text, historic fiction, some of it true, you can find in a social studies book, some of it definitely not true, created by the author. The story could have actually happened, and it is believable in that when these characters are speaking to one another, the actions that they're taking, the style of their clothing, their language specifically, is going to be true and accurate to the time that they represent. Let's get a little more deep into this idea. Let me move over here. Bam. Okay. So characters in a historical fiction. Let's remember, we're focusing on the historical fiction right now. And I use orange because next week we're going to be annotating using orange for characters. Repeat that in your brain. Orange for characters. We will be using that code to annotate text. Orange for characters. So really quick again, the characters in a historical fiction could be real or fictional. Some of them indeed are real. Some of them indeed are fictional. So shouldn't be an or. There's going to be, yes, fiction and real. Second bullet there, the characters will behave in realistic ways. And realistic not only to the time period, but the humans, the actions, the part of life that they happen to fulfill. So if we're reading about Lewis and Clark, the characters are going to behave like explorers in that timeline in the early 1800s. If we're reading about Christopher Columbus crossing the Atlantic Ocean under command from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, he is going to speak, and the people on his ship are going to speak like sailors in the 1400s. Okay? The characters' dialogue, their thoughts, their actions, their motivations must be realistic to the time period of the story, which should make sense. We would not hear someone from 2021 speaking in a historical fiction from 1492. It wouldn't make sense. The people in 1492 would look at us like we were from outer space. They would be very confused by our language, by our dialect, by the words we chose, by our accents. Now, the third bullet, the characters and the people can be real while others can be fictional. And it says can, but that should be amended. The characters and people will be real and some will be fictional. Thus, it's a historic fiction. Historic is based on real history. The fiction is what the author creates. And the last bullet there, the characters, it should say, also may be fictitious, but based on a person who actually lived. Now, that one's a little bit interesting. Think about that. There may be a character that the author, the fictional author, has rearranged, renamed, done something different to, but that character's personality might be based on somebody who actually really lived. Did you understand that? Let me say that again. So a fictional author might create a brand new fictional character, but borrow and bend and flex and smush together ideas from other real people. It happens in movies all the time. Now, other than characters, we're talking about fictional settings, but they're not often fictional unless we're in a very private moment, like someone's residence. But basically, the settings in historical fiction, because the history is based on real fact, history always refers to time and place, and both count and are important. Let me say it again. Time and place. So the year of 1804, the year of 1492, whatever year, whatever dates are being offered in the fiction are most likely accurate to real history. The time, whether it be a month, a week, a time of day when a major event occurred, usually also very important and very accurate. The setting is authentic and consistent with historical evidence. So the author of historic fiction has done their homework and done the research in real history. The big setting references. So when we talk about a city name or a boat name or something large, a specific day in history, these are often historical fact. While the small, the private settings are the historical fiction. So when you have two characters talking about whether they're going to be safe as they go on the boat this evening in a Christopher Columbus fiction, that moment, that midnight conversation, midnight being a part of the setting, is probably fictionalized, as would be the dialogue. Setting. Plot. Now this is when we're talking about the conflicts, the major events, the troubles, the struggles, the actions that make the story move forward. So the plot is based on real events that are mixed with fictional events. These events make sense, again, to the time period and have a solution to the problem at the end. The plot will contain conflicts, troubles, struggles, action, and obstacles faced in real history, but some are also made up. Again, especially when you get down to the private stuff between two characters in a lesser public way, the private conflicts, the private actions, those are oftentimes the fictionalized pieces in a historic fiction. Now, tone and point of view. Let me get myself out of the way here. Bam. Okay. So again, when we talk tone and point of view, this is kind of a big deal. The historical fiction will take a first person. So the character will say, the narrator will say, well, I woke up this morning. I got myself prepared. I put my gear on board ship of the Nina. Okay, the I will speak and tell the story. That's first person. Or there's going to be a third person point of view. Third person can be third person limited or third person omniscient. And the reason third omniscient, because once we can read inside of a character's mind and hear their private thoughts, now we know that this is fiction, for sure, right? First person is very common. Third person omniscient is very common. We're going to read about that third person omniscient in our text today. Now, let's move over to historical account. Now we're talking real history. We're talking stuff that you would hear in a history book, you could find in a museum, that you could look up and fact check, and it would be right on, spot on true. So let me get myself again out of the way right here and plop myself over here in the corner of this old Abbey church. And it says a historical account is a chronological account of some relevant event in history. Meaning relevant, it's a big deal. It's a thought. Lewis and Clark, yes. Christopher Columbus, absolutely yes. The sinking of the Titanic, these are relevant historical events. People know about them at some level. Its focus may be on one or several of the characters that were there, or on a series of the events and specific conflicts. Right? So the historic account is going to focus on the real people, the real actions, the real conflicts, to let the reader know, hey, this was real all day long. Now, like any story though, okay, like a story, the historical account has parts or elements that make it, right? So there are going to be people that are always real. We can call them the characters, we can call them the people, but in a historical account, They are fact. The setting and time and place, these again, the physical space where this event took place is real. The dates when they occurred are real. Nothing about the settings has been altered when you read a history book. Every detail that historians can gather are placed without bias in that text. As we get close to the end here, conflicts, the major events, the troubles, the struggles, the obstacles, the difficulties that shape and describe that event are real. And they impacted the characters and people in real ways. Guys, you hear that in our social studies text all the time. Real characters having real conflicts, facing real things. Like we're studying right now with the Protestant Reformation and then the Counter-Reformation. Oh my goodness, these were real problems, real events, real people doing real big things. The point of view, when we hear a point of view in a historic account, it's not going to be told from first person unless we're quoting someone, and it's surely not going to contain bias and emotion unless the author is quoting someone. The point of view in a word choice in a historical account, again, neutral without bias. Just the facts, again, just the facts. Okay, guys, that closes up our second overview of comparing and contrasting historical fiction and historical accounts. And I want you guys to be real solid on what both of them are in order to go forward into our activities next week, where we will actually begin comparing and contrasting. All right, guys, I'm out.